What the research tells us is that we tend to tell people what we've got in our head already. We come and we say, hey, I came up with this amazing idea because that's what's left in our head, that amazing idea, right? And what we did is forgot how that amazing idea got into our head, how we made those decisions, how we saw need, what we really did that made us say, this is an amazing idea. So today, what we'll do is explore what makes people say, yes, that is an amazing idea. Let's totally do it, right? We'll break it down to tools and techniques that you can actually do, right? So you might take notes and set appointments for yourself. During our workshops, we set appointments for ourselves as well. In fact, the number one thing as to whether or not you do something later is whether or not you get it in your calendar, right? So maybe we'll get action items out of today. Sound good? All right. So it basically breaks down into two sort of main categories, right? People absolutely that people say yes to. People that you want to say yes to, right? So it turns out that those people display behaviors and traits. And so let's look into some of that. What we're not trying to say is, hey, be like this. I mean, you can't just be, you are who you are already, right? What we can do is maybe tweak our behaviors a little bit. So we'll look into that. And then we'll look at the science of decision making. Super fascinating. And what that basically is the steps that human beings use to make decisions. So if we know the steps that human beings use to make decisions, then we can use those steps when we bring our ideas to people. And then they're like, yes, right? So that's what we're looking at today. Now, what you might do is start with this. Our workshops are all super hands-on. We try everything. People leave with plans and new skills. So let's at least do that a little bit here today. Let's think about a person that you would like to have more influence with. A real person in your head, come up with a name. In the chat, can you give me a yes when you've got a name in your head? Don't share their name, especially if they're here, Tom. Okay, we got a yes. Here we go. Okay, the yeses are popping in a little bit. All right. Now, let's think a little bit about something that we would like that person to say yes to, or something we wish they would have said yes to about in the past, right? That's okay as well. So many of our ideas come out and then boop, 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 boop. That whole no second chance for first impression, that's a real thing, isn't it? So now you've got somebody real, yes? Okay, good. Let's start here with the types of people that people say yes to. You're probably picturing somebody like that already. What's interesting is there's a study that came out in 2018 in the Journal of Behavioral Decision Making that they were like, forget what people say yes to. Let's instead focus on the types of people that people say no to, which is fun, right? We have a little bit of an easier time coming up with things we don't like. So for you, in the chat, what are the types of people that you say no to, or that you're more predisposed to say no to, right? Maybe those people have traits. Maybe those people are in a specific place in their career. What are the types of people that you tend to say no to, or are more likely to say no to, or you want to say no to them anyway? Are you thinking about it a little bit? I'll give you the top 4. Here we go. Ready? These are the top 4 types of people anyway, that people say no to based on this study anyway. Number 1 is just people they don't even know, right? I don't know you. Sound familiar, right? Also people they don't like. People we like have okay ideas and we're like, all right, sure. And people we don't like and they have fantastic ideas and we're like, I don't like you. Right? Of course, credibility really matters. We'll dig a little bit into that. And then, hey, do you know people say no all the time? You know what I mean? Those people. And then those people come around asking to do something and you sure don't want to say yes to them. And we all kind of get that we don't want to be that person. And so we over say yes to things, don't we? Don't we? I know I do. Right. So let's start digging in a little bit to these here. Hey, in the chat, 1, 2, 3, 4, out of these, if you'd like to avoid being that person the most, which one's the most important for you to avoid? Do you want everybody to like you? Do you want to really be seen as credible? Maybe you want people to know you. Right? Maybe you just don't want to have that reputation of the person who says no all the time. And that's a real thing, isn't it? All right, well, let's start here then. In social psychology, which is of course a branch of psychology, there are proxims and theories, and one of the big ones around influence, they say this is where you have to start. They say, look, if you're not near that person, good luck, good luck. That's why politicians still go around the world on a train or whatever, fly to different destinations, meet people, press the flesh, they call it, right? That's the social psychology proxim or of proximity. And so what they're saying basically is this, that we need to get in that person's circle if we want to influence them. So that circle nowadays is really widening up. That could be like getting in meetings that they have, or interacting with them on LinkedIn. Meet a marketer, you will meet somebody who tells you, go interact with the people that you want to work with on LinkedIn. It's interesting, isn't it? So for you in your head right now, that person who you said you wanted to have more influence with, how can you get closer to them? How can you be in their circle? Can you get yourself invited to their meetings? Can you set up a recurring meeting with them? Maybe can you just go out to lunch? Maybe you pop up on their LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is that you do or don't yet do. That's step one. All the rest of this stuff means nothing if we can't get near that person, right? Okay, so as we go down the list of people that people say no to and people that conversely people say yes to, we get to people that we like. I don't know about you. I've over trusted people that I like. I've over said yes to people that I like. Can you relate? Can you give me a yes right now if you've over trusted and over said yes to people just because you like them? Right? Right? Okay, so you probably know those people who are schmoozers, I guess. You know, they're great in social situations. I know somebody who you bring him into a room and you look around and he's into a big conversation with somebody just a couple of minutes later. And that's not really me, right? I'm also not one of those people who builds relationships because you're supposed to build relationships, you know, right? So if one of the big parts of influence is that people like you and you want to be genuine, how do you go around doing that? You know what I mean? It's kind of a little weird, isn't it? Well, here's the thing. There is a really cool technique that you can use, and you can start using it right now because people like people. And the opportunity that you give somebody to like you is letting them see you as a person. This is a really neat technique. It comes out of a study where they studied executive presence. You know what I mean? Like the presence executives have, that gravitas. Well, it turns out that most of that gravitas is by the way that they show up in their behaviors, not just in how they're being. And one of the most highly correlated was how they responded to like, hey, how are you? You know what I mean? When people are like, how are you? And you're like, fine. Or even worse, some people are like, oh, well, let me tell you how I am. Then they tell you. That's not this technique. Instead, this technique is when somebody asks you how you are, you look up in your head and you tell them the last fun or interesting thing that happened to you. Like we're talking about like 20, 30 seconds, not a great big long story, just the last fun or interesting thing, right? So for example, how are you, David? And I'm like, oh, I'm great. You know, we have 3 dogs. They're all bulldogs. There's 2 little ones and a big one. And this morning I woke up with the snory one right here in my ear and the stinky one, let's call her, with the dangerous area pointed right at my face, and the big one pushing me off the bed. So I was like hanging off. And I woke up and I was like, this is the life, right? So I don't know if you loved me before, and it's a little bit easier to like me now that you've seen a little bit of me. You know what I mean? Let's try it in our heads right now. I'll ask you, hey, how are you? And you look up in your head and think about the last fun or interesting thing that happened to you. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Anything fun or interesting. Ready? Hey, person on the other end of this webinar, how are you doing? Right? And it's neat because we can share that without social danger It's quick, it's easy, and it's out. People either engage with you, they're like, oh, I have dogs, or they don't, and you move along, but they get to see you. And people say yes to people that they like. At least give those people a chance to like you. You know what I mean? Give them a chance. This is one of the reasons that salespeople spend the first parts of calls sort of trying to get to know you and letting them get to know, and letting you get to know them. It's neat, isn't it? Tom loves the weather, is what's going on for him. Fantastic. Any questions popping up? If they do, please feel free to pop them into the chat. And so let's get into this one. Let's get ourselves a little bit into credibility. Credibility is really interesting, isn't it? People say yes to people who are credible. There's a fascinating study published in the Journal of Organizational, what is it? It's Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Process. Ha, that sounds like just to read the title takes a while, doesn't it? Right. Either way, what this study did was basically break down the things that people do to appear as credible. So we're not talking necessarily about the people you already know. Let's say you're standing in front of someone, or you've got something new for your boss, and what you're saying needs to be credible, or you've just met this person and you need to be credible. These are the top 3 things. And by the way, they are in this order. If you want to write them down, great. And we'll provide a recording of the webinar after the webinar as well. Ready? You want to show up credible? Here's how you do it. Number 1 is you prove past success. This is what case studies are all about, isn't it? We've had success doing this. That's the best thing you can do. Now you're like, but this is the first time I've done this. Well, then go to number 2. And number 2 is quoting research and data, right? About 20% of people won't even believe you at all if they have no idea where your ideas are coming from. And then the rest are swayed, as far as credibility goes, by the research and data that you pull out. By the way, there's another study about quoting research and data. To appear most credible when you quote the research and data, the number 1 thing to call out is the name of the journal. What you'll notice the way we do it anyway, is we say, there was a study published in the Journal of Organizational Behavior and the Human Decision-Making Process, right? And it sounds good, doesn't it? Now down in the speaker notes, we quote out the whole quote, but either way, that's where you start. That's number 1. Number 2 is the name of the institution that performed the study, whether it's an academic institution like Harvard, or if it's a more sort of professional institution like the Gallup organization, that sort of thing. Neat, isn't it? It's neat. And then of course, number 3 is showing experience. Anytime you can show experience, there you go. All right, so here's what we've got so far, that you need to get closer to that person, or good luck with any of this stuff, right? That's maybe the biggest one. Past that, people say yes to people that they like, and a really easy and fun, and by the way, it feels good too, way to share yourself is when people ask you how you're doing, tell them something fun or interesting that happened recently. That's always a nice way to move through life, and to appear credible. If you can call out your past successes, then fantastic. If past success is not quite as easy to call out, then we can call out journal articles that we found, or research studies, even websites. Calling things out makes a big difference as far as credibility goes. Great. Okay, so here's the other one, and this is a big one. We say yes to things all the time, don't we? We over say yes. In social psychology and evolutionary biology was the word I was looking for. They say that it's built into us to say yes. That as pack animals, that the more we say yes to each other, the more that we are getting along, and we survive and breed through evolution. Now, on top of that, we also all know that when I give to you, you give to me. People are nice to you, you're nice to them. If people aren't nice to you, you tend to not be nice to them, right? And that theory plays both ways. Negative reciprocity basically means if somebody says no to you, you say no to them. And so now we're afraid to say no. And yet we still want to be influential, and that kind of tends to wreck our calendars, if not our lives, doesn't it? There is a fantastic study by the poster boy of psychology. Every age has a famous psychologist. This age's famous psychologist is Daniel Kahneman. He's the person that came up with intellectual biases and all kinds of other stuff. Daniel Kahneman. He's got a fantastic book called Thinking Fast and Slow, and great TED Talks as well. And one of the super cool things that Daniel Kahneman pioneered anyway, basically says this: look, people don't remember what actually really happened. What they remember are the peaks, like the big experiences, and more than anything else, the end of things. That rule, if you want to go fall into a Wikipedia hole, is called the peak end rule, because that's what people remember, is the peak and the end, right? And so if we need to say no to people, what we don't want them remembering is that we said no. That's not the part that we want to stick, right? Sometimes assertiveness training says things like, be firm with your no, just say no. And for people who are getting really pushy, that does matter, right? And that's not what we want to navigate as we're moving through daily life. There's a fantastic study that Harvard did trying to find the best communicators, where they talked to 46,000 people asking who's the best communicator, and then followed those people around. And they found some very strong correlations in the way those people said no that plug in exactly to that peak end rule. So here's the thing. If we're going to be an influencing person, we can't also be a person with the reputation of saying no all the time. So instead of just saying no, here's how we do it. Instead of saying no, we say reasons. And the difference between reasons and excuses is how long you talk, right? Oh, my calendar's completely booked. Or I don't think I'm the right person for that. Or that's not really my jam, right? Those are reasons, yeah? If we go on and on, after a while, it starts to become it feels like I'm whining, or there's excuses going on. Now, what we're doing here, if you talk to Daniel Kahneman about it, is avoiding that peak experience. There's no in the peak experience. There are reasons. I mean, people get that you're saying no. You know what I mean, right? Now, here's the thing. Remember, what people remember more than anything else is the end of things. And this is true for you as well. You go on a vacation, the end of the vacation is amazing, right? You remember the end of relationships and the end of movies. It was a pretty good movie, but they ruined it at the end, or the end was amazing. Here's the thing. If when we're saying no, what we do is end with giving, instead of just ending with the no, now you're really somewhere. So here's what it sounds like. Oh, Tom, my calendar's completely booked. I can probably help next week. Or, oh yeah, I'm not really sure that's my jam, but if you like, I can help you brainstorm something. Or, I am feeling kind of weird today, but maybe Tom can help you out with that. Tom, right? Notice every time I've ended with giving. This is why it makes sense to open the door for people, right? Salespeople or customer service people, when there's somebody who's upset, you end the interaction by giving them something, right? Even if they're not wrong. It's neat, isn't it? All right, so here's how it works. Instead of saying no, you say your reasons, and make sure you end with giving. All right, so here's where we are. We are now the type of person who people like, who they're around. We're not the people who say no all the time. We've got credibility. Now we're the type of person that people like, right? And people like people who say yes, who people say yes to the people that they like. And so here we go. Now, when we're bringing our ideas to people, here are the important things about bringing our ideas to the people. This is a big one. There's a study came out all the way in 1978. So it's like a classic. I love those classic studies. It was performed at Harvard and published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology. And they did it at a copy center, like at Kinko's. What they basically did was had people try and cut in line, right? So, hey, can I cut? When it was busy. And what they found was that people were way more likely to say yes. In fact, 53% more likely to say yes if you included any kind of why at all, right? Now, if there was a very good why, people were more likely to say yes. But if the why was because I need to make copies, which is clear you're making copies, people were 53% more likely to say yes. Here's the thing. Anytime there's a request, always include a why. This is especially important in negotiation. We have negotiation workshops where if you start with an aggressive offer, it's easy to offend people. If you start with an aggressive offer and you've got a reason behind it, oh, I'm completely broke, or our business is so busy right now, I don't know how much we can fit in, right? They might not say yes. And at the same time, it's a lot less likely that they're going to get offended. You can use this for buying stuff on Facebook or Craigslist, that sort of business, right? Now, as we're moving into it, just having a why isn't really enough when we get down, right? Instead, here's what we're going to do now. We're going to, instead of just pitching, check it out. What we're going to do instead is influence with the decision-making cycle that ends up being a buying cycle. Now, this was originally put out at the University of Massachusetts at Dartmouth, where the marketing department and the psychology department got together and they said, let's figure out what the decision-making process is like, basically, so people can buy stuff, money, right? And they came out with a 7-step process, and psychologists were like, what? And they all like to argue and fight. And they're like, no, there's only 12-step process, or, oh no, there's only this many processes to decision-making. What's neat though, is that there are 4 that everybody can agree on. So this is what a decision-making or a buying cycle looks like. And people are always talking about, I'll buy that idea, aren't they? First, the most important thing for any kind of decision-making or buying cycle is whether or not people think there's a problem that needs to be solved. If you think about all the stuff you need to do something about in your life now, and do something about that, I gotta do something about that, I gotta do something about that, it's almost all to solve a problem, isn't it? Nice to haves are nice to haves, and yet we're also conditioned to lead with the benefit. Leading with the benefit doesn't get people paying attention. If you're like, you got a problem, people are like, I do. Now they're paying attention. Now, if you're going to buy something, you go looking around online. You're like, what am I going to do about that? Oh, there's a solution, right? So you find a solution. Just because you found something doesn't mean that it's going to work, which is why next you have to kind of show yourself in your own head why that's going to work. And if it does work, then we want to know how much it costs. Right? So here's what we're boiling all of this down to today. That when you're showing up as the type of person who people like to say yes to, the way that you bring your ideas makes the biggest difference. Here's the way. Always start with the problem. Remember that person that you wanted to say yes to your idea? What problem does your idea solve? Next, you'll propose a solution. You need to get that solution out there real quick. Basically, here's what we're trying to do. Then here's why that'll work. And people won't buy an idea or anything if they don't know how much it costs, right? So you have to tell them how much it costs. Now, in a business, that doesn't need to be money. That can absolutely be time spent. In fact, most business decisions get made on how much time is it going to cost us, doesn't it? Here's what this sounds like. We talked to our facilitators, and every single one of them said that the janky design of our PowerPoints was making us look bad and lowered their confidence and embarrassed them. So what I'm proposing is that we get together with professional graphic designers, put them together with teachers so they can make something that looks good and is educationally sound. In the British Educational Research Journal, there's a study that shows that people are 83% more likely to believe a facilitator when the facilitator's handout materials look good. And what is a slide deck if it's not a handout material, right? Now, here's the thing. We found offshore designers that we can work with. We're looking at hours for the facilitator. We're looking about an hour for each workshop, so not that much time. We're looking about $100 per PowerPoint to get it redesigned. What do you say? That's something people can say yes to, isn't it? Now, in the longer workshops, we practice that and try it out and put it on and make real pitches that then people go back and use with their leaders to get their leaders to say yes. Influence is not about telling people your idea. Influence is about showing up as the kind of person that people want to say yes to, and then giving them something in the order that they need to make a decision to say yes. It's pretty neat, isn't it? If you thought about it, if you did this, if you practiced it and got good at it, do you think it would make it more likely for people to say yes? It's cool, isn't it? Well, here's what's coming up next. Next week, Tom Vorvis, the master data wizard at Gravity Learning, will talk basically about how to speed up business with smarter SQL. SQL is a query language that you can use to query a database. And the way that database is queried makes a big difference as to how the database actually runs. So this will be a techie kind of one. If you know techie people, please feel free to share it. And otherwise, after that, is all about announcing change. We've seen people announce change and it goes, and there's an uphill battle from there, right? So we will examine the psychology, secrets, and skills and steps to announcing change in a way that makes change stick, gets people.